right, so very quickly, the panel is about from energy providers to data centers, who holds the power. This is not about who has control. This is not about who owns the lawsuit. This is really a conversation to open up a discussion about what's going on. Things have changed. Our whole industry's changed. It's wonderful. With that, I would like to say we've got a fantastic panel to look at the issues. Let me just read the first sentence, which came from DCD magazine. As the U.S. power grid evolves, the growing demand for energy, particularly driven by AI, presents unique challenges and opportunities, comma, in Virginia. It's like they wrote it for this. It's genius. So with that, let's get going on to the conversation. A lot of questions coming up. But first, I'm the CTO of DCD, so pleasure to be with you, Stephen Warren. We've also got Mario Sawaya. Right after him, we've got Tony, Shelby, and then John. So what we're going to do is each person is going to give a brief intro because of their perspective on what's going on here. What's going on in regards to data center versus utility versus power versus grid, microgrid, on-site, off-site. Big discussion. And with that, Mario, please introduce yourself a bit, but also your perspective on this topic.
Thanks, Stephen. Excited to be here. Excited to be with these esteemed panelists with me. My name is Mario Sawaya. I lead AECOM's global technology sector, which means that anything we do in the data center space anywhere in the world falls under me. And I think that the thing that I'd like to convey here from AECOM's perspective is the fact that we sit sort of at the nexus of a few important places that are relevant to this conversation. So you all may know us because we've designed data centers in 33 countries over the last 5 years. We're consulting everywhere, doing construction of some data centers in the US. But beyond that, outside of the data center building, we're also a big infrastructure consultant. We do a lot of energy work, we do a lot of water work, we do a lot of fiber work. And so we sit at the nexus of energy and data centers. And the main reason that I wanted us to be on this panel was because I think energy is the most important and the most interesting and the most challenging topic that we're facing right now in this sector, and it also has major implications on society as a whole. And the second reason I wanted to be on this panel, and the reason that I chose for AECOM to sponsor it, is because you rarely get this diversity of perspectives on a panel, right? We have an energy producer and a trader, a co-location owner, operator. We have an insurance technology company and a consultant and contractor. And I think this speaks to where we should be going in this sector, right? I think, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit, I think we're reaching the end of what individual stakeholders can do in this space. They're not able to actually exercise or force any more control, and the only way forward, the only roadmaps that we can draw moving forward is to bring together perspectives and stakeholders like this so we can unlock opportunities. And I have a few ideas of how I think we can do that. Yeah, that's us. Thanks,
fantastic. Stephen. Again, I want to remind everybody, this is an AECOM sponsored session. We're so happy to have you guys do it. And I personally, as a New Yorker, would like to thank AECOM for helping rebuild John F. Kennedy Airport.
Our pleasure.
You're on the 3rd floor of the 111 Federal Building in the Circle, and thank you. I was there all last week, and all I could say is walk by and kiss you. Thanks for taking my 1960 airport and bringing it to this century.
We're doing 2 of those terminals, actually.
I know. So the parking lot. Tony, please, to you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Good morning, and appreciate everybody coming out to hear us talk about this, very important topic within the data center space. Happy to hear that I'm a native New Yorker as well, and excited about the work you've done on JFK. So don't know if you did the TWA hotel, but that's pretty awesome place as well. So I run a company called Ocolo. It's an online marketplace for data centers. I've been in the data center space and telecoms for, I hate to say it, but 28 years now. And looking forward to talking about the importance of energy. I think, we'll hear from all of my colleagues here about what's going on. It is quite a hot topic. Let me pass it off to Shelly.
Shelly, please.
Or do you want it?
Shelly. Yeah.
Shelly, hi. Shelly from Shell. Yeah, really happy to be here, and I echo everything that Mario said. We do all things energy. Produce it, we supply it, we trade it, we market it, and as Mario was saying, it's just not enough, right? There's just not enough, and we are starting to see our role in this space evolve. And it's not something where the buck stops at one entity or one part of the value chain, and that's exactly why we're here. It's just that In order for us to solve the extreme demand that we're seeing from within this sector, it will require inevitably for us to all work together and maybe step a little bit outside of our own respective traditional business lines. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, John. Please.
Hi, good morning. My name is John Hilt. I'm the head of data center and operations at GEICO. I come with a unique perspective. I started in the industry as a consulting engineer designing data centers, transitioned to an operator at Equinix overseeing a large portfolio of data center assets, and now on the enterprise side. This is special to me because as GEICO is in mid-transformation, we're in flight, we had specific challenges about finding suitable co-location space for our private cloud. So I'm happy to be part of the conversation, look forward to it.
I got to say, John has a history in this industry from his time at Equinix, because every time you saw him, he was constantly moving, always busy. It's wonderful to have you actually in one location, John. Beautiful. So I loved what Shelley said right up front. It's evolving. This is an industry evolving. Everything's changing. We're finding new demands, new requirements, new capacity issues at the same time, sustainability. So I'm going to throw out a simple word: partnerships. Partnerships. And from AECOM's perspective, it's one of the greatest things you do in terms of power partnerships and data center partnerships, looking at this evolution that's occurring. How can we create new partnerships? Because it's always been different. No data center operator wants to be a utility. Last I checked. No, we even got John. No. Genius. But the point is, people are asking you a lot of questions these days. The relationship has changed. How has it changed? What should we be thinking? You have some great ideas on this. I just want you to take it off, because we cannot be adversarial. We have to work together in this problem issue. So please, over to you, Mario. Your thoughts.
Thanks, Stephen. I think we're actually seeing more partnerships than we recognize, than we call partnerships right now, right? So most impactful right now, and probably the one that has the most salacious headlines, is the DOE investing $400 million, or $900 million, making that available to first movers in the industry, in parallel with AWS announcing that they want to be one of those first movers in the industry. That's a partnership, right? That's a way to jumpstart something that is a parallel track, and it may be a long shot, and it may be way out there from a nuclear perspective, but that's one of those partnerships. And from that, we saw partnerships between companies like Google and Cairo. So we went from a federal and private sector partnership to a private and private sector partnership. We're also seeing, and I think we can characterize this as a partnership, conversations like the one between AEP Ohio and the big tech companies, right? It's not adversarial, right? That's not how I would characterize it, although it's fun to do it that way. It gets more clicks. But we're seeing conversations being brought to light that actually try to answer the questions that are the most important to be answered right now. Who's going to pay for the infrastructure? Where do we put the risk? How do we put guardrails around that? And how do we protect the interests of the public and the interests of the private sector? So I think that there's a lot of private-public sector partnerships that need to happen a little bit more. And one of the ways that AECOM is trying to make that happen is by creating, as I said, we sit on the nexus of energy and infrastructure, energy and data centers. We also sit at the nexus of public and private. So the idea that we have and that we're trying to bring to the table is creating spaces where multiple of those stakeholders can come together and say, how do we avoid situations where there is some incredible amount of investment required just to serve this one data center client? How do we make it so that cities who need to make their grids more resilient are saying, how do we attract a data center company to come to our state so that they can help us pay for the additional redundancy and strength in our grid, right? The resilience of our grid. And I don't think we've gotten there yet, but there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to bring those conversations together, and that's going to unlock potential for advancements within 5 years or 6 years, as opposed to what we're talking about in nuclear, which is 10, 15, 20 years still.
Absolutely beautiful point, bringing up nuclear at the end. Thank you. Tony, you come from a very unique perspective, and I'm going to say the word vantage, because for a long time, you really knew partnerships. It's all you did. And now with Ocolo, it's one of the things you do a lot. You know, you're sitting there between so many different groups, and you're actually enabling them. So could you take us to this next level in your thought process? How do we even do it? How do we get past this adversarial issue and just move forward in what we need to get done?
So I think we've seen a huge evolution over the last 18 months of data centers. It's been just an incredible growth, mostly in the hyperscale side, but I don't want to, forget about some of the legacy businesses of interconnections, which still exist. And, I was part of one of those 10 years ago. I think partnerships mean really different things. You know, the traditional partnership has, from a data center perspective, was you're going to partner with a fiber provider, you're going to partner with, you know, folks that can help you construct your data centers. Now it's really branched out. I mean, it's pretty amazing that we have an energy provider on this. If you look back even 4 years ago, there wouldn't be an energy provider on this panel. And likely it would just be providers. It wouldn't even be an enterprise. It'd mostly be us telling about what's going on in the data center. What's great about that is we're all sitting here talking about how we're going to collaborate and take it to the next level. And I think that's important, right? We have traditionally kind of operated in somewhat silos, and I think as we move forward, there's going to be a necessity to work together even more. It is going to be interesting to see what happens over the next 18 months. You know, we were talking prior to this being up here about kind of the growth that's happened. So over the last 10 years, there's been exceptional growth, but those last 10 years will be exceeded within the next 18 to 24 months. So the growth is just incredible. And you're going to see more and more folks, you know, as AI continues to spin up, and I don't think, you know, we all talk about it, it's kind of the buzzword. It used to be edge data centers, now it's AI. We're going to see, you know, where the folks that are actually spinning up these large data sets ultimately land. And I think, you know, it's going to be driven by, you know, a lot of the larger companies, the Googles, the Microsoft, but there are secondary folks that are going to provide AI and contribute to kind of this exceptional growth. Not to be forgotten, you know, there is a piece that transits all that critical data, and those are the interconnection data centers, which are growing. If you look back in 2012, a one cabinet deployment was like, you know, 1 kVA. Now it's, you know, 15 kVA. So it's grown. So it's really exceptional of how quickly it's grown. And I think you're only going to see that. I think it'll be great to hear from Shelley, because I think we're reliant on, you know, these energy providers who are so actually relevant. And, you know, I don't think we thought of that 10 years ago. It was just like, hey, yeah, we're just going to plug in a server and that's it. Now it is the thing, you know, and you really need to kind of capture that. And what that thing is how to partner and how to kind of make all this happen. Because for those of you who are sitting on your phones, you want to make sure that you can access a website in less than 2 milliseconds, right? And so if you don't, you're going to be pissed. And we got to make sure that the energy providers, and we're all here providing that data and that ability to access whatever you want. Let me pass off to Shelley.
Yeah, so you don't get pissed, right?
Yeah, that's right. You get really
You don't want to
pissed.
get pissed off.
You don't want me to be
Where's my power?
Exactly.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
That was good.
Did I steal your thunder there, Steve?
Oh, that was brilliant.
All right.
I tried to
you.
keep it. I tried to keep it G-rated. Okay.
No,
Yeah, I think, yeah.
it was perfect.
Yeah, well.
Thank you.
We weren't sure if that was going to be the title of the original panel. Where's my power? I'm pissed. But no, good news. Good news. No, I want to talk a little bit about partnerships in the sense that, you know, I think I'll at least speak for myself. 10 years ago, there wasn't a data center or tech focus at Shell, right? And now everyone that I've talked to at the conference in the last 2 days has said, yeah, you know, I'm, you know, specializing in this vertical, or this is our sector focus, or our business just collectively built up around and rallied around this sector. Some of you have been in the data center industry for 28 years, and you're like, yeah, we knew this was coming.
Please don't remind me that.
I'm not sure that all of us knew that. And what's interesting, too, is that you see within companies, the roles of what we do is evolving. And we recognize that all of that expertise doesn't lie in-house. And you can build, and you can try to build teams that come from, you know, within different industries. Hyperscalers can go and hire energy procurers. Energy procurers can go out and try to figure out how to build a cabinet, but it's not going to happen fast enough. So we recognize that, and we know that it's going to require, you know, just honest answers around how do you partner, where you have gaps in your business, where do you need to be educated, and then Tony, I think you referenced it around risk. Some companies are not the natural holders of risks. I don't think that we expect a data center to understand what basis risk means, or what time of day risk means, or how to manage and mitigate energy management systems. In the same way that you wouldn't expect Shell to understand how to build a cabinet and what GPU chip to use, right? So That's where partnerships come in, and that's the only way that we will get past this. Status quo isn't going to work. The only way that we can actually address the demand that's coming on is to work with others, and that's exactly what we do.
Great, great. John, please.
Partnerships are key to success. In my former role, we were constantly adding, building, and the only way we're able to do this is have these tight-knit relationships with our utility providers. And we met quarterly, if not more frequent, and allowed the relationship to be a shared success. It's everyone's success. And being open and honest about our absorption, our next moves, right? So that they could work with us, with them, for ramp schedules to follow our absorption through this time. And without that and just surprising them, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Absolutely perfect. So let's now take this idea of partnerships, collaboration, working together. We all know we have an issue. Now, let's not go into it. But what are the new models of how you work? What are the new business models? Not everybody's a hyperscaler. I can buy 3 Mile Island. Turn it back on. Love that. Okay. I think it's great. So, but my question is, what are the new business models? What are the new technologies? You've all thrown out nuclear. What are we looking at? What should we be thinking about in terms of the partnership and collaboration? How does it work? I mean, as I said before, many data center operators don't want to become a utility. The regulations are out of control. Oh, and by the way, we've done a fantastic job of staying under the radar. Now we're not. We're the hot topic in the front page of a newspaper. Yeah, it's paper, remember that? So question, Mario, what are the new business models you're looking at AECOM? What are the new technologies you're looking at AECOM? And how are you bringing this together? Because I have to even say this at JFK, you're actually looking at combined heat and power for the facility. It's amazing. Well done, thank you. That means the rest of us can have electricity for my air conditioning. But how are the new business models? And AECOM has done so many of them. What are the new technologies also? I want to turn it to you for that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we are all talking about nuclear, but I don't think that that's the answer that's going to get us where we need to go in the next 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years. I think to answer that question, you have to start with what do we all agree on, and what are the incentives that we need to align to get there, right? So I think I can safely say that at least 90% of this room, and hopefully all of this panel, can agree on one thing, right? We all want power infrastructure to get built to make the grid more resilient and to make the grid more decarbonized, right? That's what we want to see. And the fundamental challenge that I think we're going to face when we're developing these new partnerships and these new business models is, where can we find common incentives and priorities beyond that, right? So the public sector obviously has an obligation and is incentivized to look after the citizens and the communities. The private sector has an obligation to look after the shareholders. So what are and that's always going to be a disconnect that we face, right? And when we are looking at partnerships, it has to be public and private, from my perspective. We have to bring those two together when it comes to energy. And so from my perspective, the things that we need to figure out how to chase are, number one, in the short term, the thing that I think can all agree on from a public and a private sector perspective is, we want the grid to be more resilient. We want the grid to be more extensive, right? So we can find models that chase that, right? And then from a long-term perspective, I think we can all agree that we want the grid to be more decarbonized. So models that focus around that. And so with that as a basis, I think what I would like for AECOM's contribution to this situation to be is to bring the planning process for data centers further forward, right? Right now, to reframe the question of the subject of the panel, it's not who holds the power, it's no one holds the power, right? I don't think any of us hold the power individually. If you talk to a regulator, they'll say, we're trying to deliver this. We have an obligation to our ratepayers, to our customers, to deliver whatever it is that Tony's company needs for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. If you talk to the developers, they'll say, well, yeah, we know we have 20 megawatts of power, but what is really secure power? Can we really get to 100 megawatts in 3 years or 5 years or 300 megawatts? Secure is just now in quotes. It's secure, right? It might be 10 years before you get it, and that's happening in some places. So how do we make it so that there's a mutual benefit where, let's say, the next developer knows that if they buy in this area, right? There's going to be limited infrastructure investment because the city has zoned it. The city has and the grid owner has said this is where we should be going, or these are the multiple places where we should be going, and really take away the consternation that comes with, well, now we need to invest $100 million to build a new transmission line out to this site, or we need to buy a nuclear power facility because there simply hasn't been enough planning to bring us to a place where the city and the utility owner are bought into what we're planning on doing. And so that's, I think, where AECOM wants to come into the conversation.
That's really interesting because it's taken an even bigger step back in terms of your starting the relationships. It always used to be that in the industry we were looking at, is there enough power in the region? Do I have connectivity? From water chill, do I have enough water? Is it potable water? Is it clean enough? Now all of a sudden you're saying, now I need to think further back in terms of that partnership relationship.
And as we're looking at these, as we're looking at this industry, I wonder if the incentive is going to change from where can we find cheap water and power to where can we find low-cost infrastructure investment, because that might be the long pole in the tent moving forward.
Perfect. Tony, to you, please. Any thoughts on new business models, this whole concept of energy as a service? You'd be into that, wouldn't you, my friend? Maybe not.
No, absolutely. Look, I think business models are going to change as technology changes, right? And we're going to figure out, who you need to partner with and to change that. I think what's going to have to happen, though, is both governments or regulators and or for-profit companies are going to have to compromise, right? Because they're going to have to. There will be a pinch in terms of how folks want to make money and obviously, but also want to expand the growth within our technology field. There's some. I think there's some clear adversity to growing. Look, if we talk about Northern Virginia, there's been a lot of push and pull with respect to power, and I think that will continue to be a challenge. And if you look at like Arizona, where data centers have been built, it's effectively they've pretty much drained the Colorado River from a water usage. So I think there's going to be a lot of new business models and looking at alternative resources to power data centers and probably you all know best. I don't know. I'm not as familiar with renewables, but that's going to be really important as we go forward, and also. Liquid cooling is obviously becoming such an important basis of what we're doing. So the new business models are going to be based on, just pure operational models, and how we ultimately adapt to those. I will say that, I sit on the board of a company called Vantage Data Centers, and we always are talking about, and I also sit on another one called 1623 Farnham, quite different. One's interconnection and the other one's hyperscale. And we're just talking about, what's the next age of growth and how do we adapt to that? And I think there's a lot of thought that's going to have to be put into that as you develop the business models. I mean, if we look at it today, how many data centers had a whole power team? You had like one half of a person 10 years ago. And now you have 10, 12, 14 people. People are looking at environmentals. So these business models are constantly evolving. It is going to be interesting to see, what is next. I mean, providing 80 kVA for a cabinet, how does that business model change? Quite dramatic. Sorry, Shelley, all yours.
Yeah.
Please.
I'll just jump in.
Take it.
Yeah, what strikes me in hearing what Mario has to say, what will all my panelists, John and Tony, there is no silver bullet, and there is not a one particular one-size-fits-all solution. We know that, right? So we know that AI is disrupting. We know that there's an immense amount of energy. We don't have to rehash all the statistics. All of you have heard how much demand there is, how much power is needed. But one of the hyperscalers with whom we work told me in a conversation, it's capacity, cost, and carbon. But that capacity, that cost, that carbon, that order of things may be different. May be different for a colo versus a hyperscaler. There may be a hyperscaler that's all full up on capacity and is looking at how am I going to decarbonize over the next 18 months. And then you might have someone that's just getting started going, I just need power right now, and I'll deal with how I'm going to decarbonize later. And so to us, that's the beauty of these partnerships. When we talk about new business models or new technologies, I can't sit up here and say that what I designed for hyperscaler 1 is going to work nicely for hyperscaler 2. I can't say that what works in Virginia is going to work in California or in India or Singapore for that matter. But what I can say is that there has to be optionality. And that's what we are really, really keen on, right? The power of choice does spur innovation. And that's one big thing that we advocate for, is that we're not wed, we're not technology specific, we are technology agnostic. And in terms of what we've seen evolve in terms of new technology is gas-fired generation with CCUS, right? We're seeing a lot of CCUS adoption. We see, absolutely, there's going to be a space for nuclear. For Shell, I mean, we have our own net zero energy emissions target. We target 2050. And we know that there's going to have to be an energy mix. It can't just be one technology. And so we're applying that mentality to ourselves as well as to the way in which we engage. And then as far as new business models, I mean, we're hearing it today that, hey, how can we use AI to actually support this industry? It's not just about AI driving or taking, but it's also about giving back. How do we use AI to create more capacity in the grid? We saw RMI come out with the whole grid enhancing technology space, right? Where now they've unlocked 6.6 gigawatts of additional capacity magically out of PJM. That's the innovation that we're talking about. It's not a one size fits all. It's going to be those things, and we're looking at them too.
I've got to say to everybody, we had a conversation a bit back when Shelley brought that up, capacity, cost, and carbon. There was total silence on the panel in the conversation. Then I heard this collective, yeah. I mean, spot on, Shelley, thank you. John, to you, please. And then we're gonna go back to Shelley's points of what do we do? What are you doing? So let's go with it, John.
All right, so specific for products, I see our old friend fuel cells. We're going to eat more into them. Behind the meter solutions and work with more of what's in our control. As everything comes about, as public utility matures, makes more product come online, we have to do things that are in our control. So I think I can see fuel cells going into markets where they weren't very much looked fondly on, right? In markets with low cost per kWh traditionally, right? And then with that, on the other side of it, starting up data centers on a temporary basis, look at bridge power in the sense of microturbines, right? Even with a 30% efficiency on the engine, we're still reasonable cost per kilowatt hour.
So let's get into it then. What are folks doing? What are you doing? What are you seeing? Talk about you, projects that you're up to, things that you've been involved in. Who wants to take it first? This is really where we're having this conversation of what to do. Great question, folks. Wonderful. Gee, it's a problem. Now solve it. What are you doing? Mario.
Yeah, I'll start with it. First of all, I'd say not enough, right? I don't think any of us are doing enough. But I will say that there's some cool projects out there that we're working on. I can't talk to specifics about clients or locations, but district energy, heat reuse situations, liquid cooling template designs, which are starting to advance into actual implementation at scale. But I think that the challenge that we're facing, and I want to speak to one of Shelley's points earlier, was you need optionality. So in the same way that when we're designing a data center template that can be used globally, or we're designing one that needs to be used across the Americas, North, Central, and South, we are thinking about what is the climate like? How much humidity is there? How much sunlight is there? What's the heat gain and all of that, right? When we're designing the cooling systems. In the same manner, what we haven't seen happen and what we're trying to push on happening now is what are the options for the local design that as it relates to energy consumption, as it relates to renewables? Is there a lot of sun? Is there a lot of wind? Are there battery manufacturers nearby? All of those pieces we don't currently have. It's still being done on a one-off basis where there is a weak energy grid. So, for example, in South Africa, where there's not a very good and reliable grid, you need much more battery. You need much more generation. You also need to potentially have your own power generation, renewable power generation nearby. But those are being done opportunistically, right? And we don't really have, as an industry, I don't think yet, options that you say, all right, here's the ways that we get to a more reliable grid, that we get to a more robust grid. I will give a shout out to, and I saw him in the audience a little bit earlier, Varus. The head of delivery at Varus is here, and I think what they're doing is tremendous. From what I understand, they're investing more into long-term battery storage, and they're using it in a way to be carbon aware, to be cost aware, to be climate aware, which allows not just for the data center to be more resilient, but for that to provide resiliency back to the grid when it's needed. those are the types of solutions that I think we need to be moving towards a little bit more.
That is such a perfect example because what they've done is beautiful. They've actually put their battery storage as a resiliency to the grid itself, and then when necessary, they can actually support the grid in terms of stabilization. Well, great example, thank you.
I remember talking to you about this actually
Yes.
in DCD Silicon Valley a couple of years
Yes.
ago. I'm so glad to see somebody actually leaning in and doing it. I think, again, back to the previous point, I think we're all, many of us stakeholders are sitting sort of at the periphery of the energy conversation saying, who's going to provide the energy, how are we going to fix this, when really what we need to be doing is finding spaces to convene and figure out these solutions together. That's where the power will be created.
Perfect. Tony, to you, what's going on? What are you doing? Projects that you're up to, my friend? Talk about it.
So I think one word that Shelley mentioned was innovation, and I think if I look on the marketplace that we have, Okolo, we have 100 plus providers, and what's interesting is we talk about we're a cutting edge industry in data centers. 0 have an API or are API capable. So it's quite interesting to say we want to innovate, and we are providing a service or infrastructure for cutting edge technology, but the providers are probably not the most in terms of their cutting edge technology. And so I think what Shelley talked about in terms of innovation, it's across the board from an industry perspective. And I think dollars need to be put into creating new types of tech and figuring out how we do things quicker, how we do things more efficiently, and obviously at a lower cost. If you think about kind of what's been going on with, everything's just gotten more expensive and slower. So it's unfortunate that we're trying to move technology and data sets faster, but we've gotten slower and more expensive. So just have to think about, what is the next tech that's going to improve that? And I think that's really important from a go forward.
Yeah, I definitely want to echo that. It is a symbiotic relationship. And we would be remiss not to use the technology that's at our disposal. I mean, it seems almost ridiculous. Why would we work with a hyperscaler? Why would an energy provider work with a hyperscaler and not use the hyperscaler's technology capability to enhance the energy system? And we do. So those are some examples. When we talk about innovative business models, there are absolutely instances in which we at Shell partner with some of the larger hyperscalers, some of the larger technology companies, to allow them to enable us from a technology perspective, enable the better energy management system, more optimization, helping our traders to optimize any of the assets that we've got running, which unlocks more power for them. So that's one example. There's ways in which we can help them to participate in demand response and doing things that, ways in which they can enable the grid better. And then, in terms of everything that goes within the data center itself, we have our own data centers. We are tinkering with our own immersion cooling technology, and we are working with AI companies and managing that. And so that's an example of newer technologies that we're using, as well as, we have a portfolio of assets from which we can draw on. Our traders have a lot of merchant plants, if you will, that are out there that not every megawatt hour is being accounted for or contracted, and that can be aggregated up and provided to a data center who needs power in the shape that they need it, in the hours that they need that power. So there's a number of things that we can do, and I agree, though, Mario, we're not doing enough, right? There needs to be more of that. Okay, so call me. No.
I gotta say, Shelley was being nice because Shell was one of the initiators of deep computing. They were in high performance computing when this industry wasn't even talking about it. They were doing it 25 years ago. They were already having issues with power usage at the capacity level. And it's so beautiful that they actually had a design. Shell designed deep computing just for exploration work and being better at it and more energy efficient. It was a beautiful statement. You worked closely with Schlumberger for it too. Brilliant move. Even upgraded their entire data center in Houston. It was awesome. Sorry about that. That was a plug for Shell. I'm sorry about that. Please, John.
No problem. I'm going to take it a different way. I think for us as an industry, we need to be more resourceful and a little bit more responsible about what we've already received so far from utility, and look back on our data centers that are sucking wind and either divest them or reinvest in them so that we can bring numbers within honest numbers, right? I can say at Geico we've done just that. So I'm preaching, what we've completed, and our PUA has dropped percentage-wise in double digits. over this past year. And that's what
I was going to say, great. That's fantastic. I got to ask, because if you're not using energy and your PUE is lower, guess what? You don't have to have this problem. So I got to ask, is that part of a new business model also for you, John? Because it's something you had to deal with when you were at Equinix. I remember this. You were dealing with so many different locations and so many different regulations. You had to come up with like 100 solutions. So is that part of the solution for you for a business model? Hey, let's not talk about getting new power. Let's try and reduce what we're using.
exactly. And I think what really worked well was tied to executive compensation.
That's the way to do it. Take away the Ferrari. Please, Mario.
You know, I'll just add to what Shelley and John just brought up. I think that a lot of these answers are hiding in plain sight, to your point, right? I was talking to one of the big data center operators here earlier, and one of the things they told me was they took the data set that they have, which they look at all the time as insofar as the performance of their critical assets, their critical power and cooling assets, and they handed it over to an AI company that analyzed it for them and came back and said, these 4 chillers are working well, this one is sucking wind, and they were able to improve their efficiency. Whereas they are always doing, just in regular operations and maintenance, going and checking on that equipment, doing their maintenance of that equipment, and they didn't know that that was the case. And so I think, to Shelley's comment earlier about unlocking 6.5 gigawatts just because we had better insights into the data, I'm not saying that this is a long-term solution, but I think there may be a lot of low-hanging fruit from AI that we're actually seeing practically come to fruition. We all talk about AI that like it's going to be the savior of everything, but it's great to see actual tangible benefits coming out of it. And ironically, AI is creating the problem, but AI also has the potential to have a positive effect on the problem.
Sure. DeepMind is the perfect example of Google using AI. By the way, I do appreciate Mario using the term suck wind when talking about air cooling. Genius.
I like that you got that.
That was so good. I'll be using that next week. Tony, please, to you, I mean, we're continuing on. Do people want to do what Mario's talking about, which is actually look at every single aspect across the board, or should we just dump it all on somebody else? How do we deal with this? Because at the same time, Shelley even brought it up. You got carbons in there. How important is decarbonization, or do we dump the carbon onto somebody else and make it their problem? Tony, you've looked at this from so many different directions. How do you look at it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, since I'm the dinosaur up here, I would say that, 15 years ago, we didn't look at any of this, right? And I think we've taken a big step forward in terms of, literally, I think, if you think about what we did 15 years ago, it was plug in a router and connect to some fiber to it. And that literally was the way data centers operated. I'm being a little bit too simplistic, but that was kind of the genesis of how things worked. We've evolved so much over the last little bit that you really do, as Mario mentioned, it's all about looking at customizing your equipment, whatever it might be, and efficiencies from a construction perspective. John brought up a really interesting point, which is there are so many data centers. If you think about what's across the U.S., I think we have 6,000 data centers or something like that. I would say maybe 60-70% are probably built 15 to 20 years ago, where they're coming up on tech refresh. And if we did do something, I think, to focus on that, which what you did is actually awesome, because you've basically done a tech refresh, so you can get your PUE down. You're probably going liquid cooling. You're moving into where we kind of need to, and then probably 10 years from now, you're going to say, hey, we got to do something different. So I think there's sort of a dichotomy here. We're building new, and we got to figure out how to become even more efficient. We have to go back and retrofit a lot of what's been built. I mean, if you look at, legacy building, 60 Hudson Street, amazing building, one of the most interconnected buildings in all of the world. I think the statistic is like 60% of the world's internet traffic passes through there on a daily basis. But if you look at that building, you go in, it's an old one, and it needs a retrofit. Megai in Hong Kong, similar, all these legacy buildings definitely need some work. And so I think John shed some light on something that's really important from a go forward from the business. Yes, there's a lot of upfront dollars. Mario, you and I talked about this earlier this week. that there's going to be a lot of retrofits to come with where tech is today. And I think that's going to be really important from a go forward.
Can I just say, just to jump on that a bit, Tony, 60 Hudson is a listed historical building. The city won't even let you make changes.
Little known fact, I used to be a U.S. attorney. That building is actually used to be the Department of Corrections headquarters. So not many people know that, but I used to get my badge there back in, again, a long time ago in 1995.
By the way, Tony did not spend any time there. He was visiting.
If you're interested, when we were at Telex, and I'm happy to share it, we actually did a documentary on both 60 Hudson and 32 Avenue Americas, and happy to share with anybody who's interested in the link. It's it's a 10-minute, so only 10 minutes of your day.
All right.
Happy to share.
Well, let's continue on with this, please, Shelley. Your thoughts on where we can take this next? Because you even brought up the whole idea of carbon. Are we looking at decarbonization? Are we looking at cost? How do we look at all these things? What do we do?
Well, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking and I always say this, I'm the least technical person in the room. And I absolutely am the least technical person on this panel. So I watched an incredible video of you guys retrofitting a data center. And that was really impressive at what Geico did. I don't know the half of what it was, but it looked really cool. And I can tell you that it's a humbling experience being in this industry. Come from 20 plus years of energy. I can talk to you about energy. I can talk to you about how a pipe goes into the ground. I can tell you how gas is produced. I can tell you how to produce power. But I can't tell you what happens after it gets onto your site as well as you could. And that's why I'm here. And that's why we should be talking. And in the same vein, I would hope that I could help you understand the risks inherent in managing an energy system. And I think that's really what it comes down to, for the crux of it. So when you say, what are you doing, or what is Shell doing, that's exactly what they're doing, is that we're hiring people like me that are not data center experts, but spend the time to come into industry conferences like this, spend the time to talk to folks like you, spend the time to be on these panels to understand the needs on the other side and understand the risks on the other side and how those things are being operated. And in the same vein, I turn around and I try to help educate as well. There are risks inherent in producing and supplying and trading energy. And I wouldn't expect that you would understand those in the same way that hopefully you wouldn't expect, but we help each other. And that's how we contract with our partners, is it literally, it's a discovery process to begin with. And in order to have a successful partnership, you have to be able to put your cards on the table and say, hey, here, this is what I'm dealing with. What are you dealing with? And let's figure out together. And I know that sounds a bit hokey, but that is exactly how we have been able to put together partnerships over the past handful of years in this sector.
Shelley, can I ask you, how do you teach people about risk? We understand risk. We're a risk-averse industry. It's called sleeping at night. It's great. I've heard about it. But point is that risk is something we appreciate from our side. You're absolutely correct. We get it from our side, in that building, in that edge, in that data center fleet. Now you're talking about something brand new to us that we don't understand. We're usually just paying you a lot of money for a substation. And make sure it's delivered. Talk to us about what we need to learn.
Well, and I think it depends on where you are and what you're accomplishing, what the objectives are. And I'll go back a handful of years when a whole bunch of hyperscalers went out and they said, we've got these sites built. Now we want to be on the forefront of decarbonization. And so what they do, everyone ran out and they started contracting. They were like, ooh, I want to get into a 25-year power purchase agreement over here down the street from my data center. And I don't know the first thing about basis risk. I don't know the first thing about time of day risk. And all of a sudden, what you were having was CFOs of major companies getting on earnings calls talking about how they had a massive power write-off because power went negative. And it's like, that's not my forte. That's not my area of expertise. So in the same vein that we don't have all of the expertise inside of a data center. And so what we do about it is we talk openly about the risks. We share it. And when we're going into contract negotiations about power and any kind of supply that we're providing, we provide options. And I've learned that in providing options and saying, here are the trade-offs between time, you want to you want to be commercially operational in 3 years, this is what that looks like. You want to be commercially operation in 18 months, you may have to make some trade-offs and concessions about the kind of technology that you're going to use, where you're going to come from, where you're going to get it, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's all about just being transparent, open, and having those discussions up front.
That is absolutely perfect. You're actually talking the same language that we live in, which is there's only three ways in life. You can have it fast, you can have it cheap, or you can have quality. Which do you want? You only get two. You can't have three. It's pretty simple in the data center industry. We know. John, I got to turn it to you, please. Thoughts on any of this? It's too big.
There's a lot of opportunity for us, and it's really around community. And what we don't always want is regulation or wait for the EU to come up with something that we can steal their homework. Right? I think events like this is where we make real strides. And it's not only necessarily about talking about that 80% story, but really giving that last 20% what really made it work, right? And the more that we can get in front of people like this and in small groups, large groups, and bring awareness to everything that we're going through and how we're solving it, I think that's the key to our success.
Okay, we're kind of running out of time a little bit, and you brought up regulators. And I was going to ask you, Shelley, about regulators, because very often data center operators just like to stay away. We don't want to be noticed, okay? Have you ever realized that we all have really bad cars and we park in the back of the lot to hide? But we live with regulators in a different world. We are working with them for their expertise to be able to purchase requirements, work with them for requirements. But I've got to ask, is there an issue? And John, you brought it up. Are we all just waiting for the European Union to come up with their next regulations on the EN 5600? Or, hey, here's scope 1, 2, 3. Here's what you need to do. So I got to ask very quickly before we go to the ending, I got to ask about regulators. And Shelley, it's got to come to you because your entire life is dealing with regulators. How do we do it? We've never dealt with this side before that well.
Well, I will say again. I mean, there's local nuances and there's global nuances, right? And the position that we have is that we are pro-choice. Pro-choice, and I know that has implications, by the way. I'm not going to get into the politics of anything else other than pro-choice in energy. Energy pro-choice. And we will do what we can to help enable that because we are firm believers that in having the choice, having optionality, you can spur innovation. And so, going to the original title of this of who holds the power, I'm like Mario. No one does. It's we all collectively have something to contribute in this space, and it would require working together, and that includes regulators. They're one of the players in the mix.
Perfect. Mario, you're about to say something because AECOM works with regulators all the time.
Yeah. I think that we're inching towards some answers, right? And you'll see four basic models happening right now, right? Either the cost causer pays, and that's just what happens, right? The question is, where does the risk sit? Who pays for it, right? So either the cost causer pays. So if AWS wants to build something and requires a transmission line, they pay for it. There's a second one that's a little bit more collaborative that's happening right now. I think it's happening in Illinois where the cost causer pays a deposit. And over time, if they hit the ramp up, then they start to get a percentage of that deposit back. We're also seeing situations where either utility owners or private sector will go to the state economic development board and say, we can bring you more tax base, help us figure out how to make this happen. Unfortunately, that puts the utility operators often in a very tight spot because they're just under pressure to deliver the same thing that everybody's already asking them to deliver. And then there's a couple of other options out there right now that I think are getting us there, but I do expect, to John's point, I expect that the conversations that are happening in Europe are much further along, and I think more balanced probably from a private sector interest and protection perspective and a public sector perspective.
We totally agree. I mean, there's even EU regulations as a directive on your transformer loss. I mean, the Europeans already have moved ahead in a lot of great areas. By the way, ditch the diesel. Don't even try and get a diesel license in Europe these days, especially in the EU. It's not going to happen. They don't want it. So let's now end up. We're right at the end. I know we're running out of time because I keep on getting waved at. But point is, final thoughts, future takeaways, lessons learned. What have you done that's important here? Don't do this at home is always a good example to things. And also, please remember, afterwards, race up and get Shelley's contact information because she's here to help. And we all need help. So I'm going to take it to the final thoughts. John, do you want to start first? Final thoughts, where are we going, what's happening?
Sure, and thank you so much. Really enjoy the platform and have the ability to get out here. Really enjoy this industry, the people, everyone's wonderful. It's just, we need to get together and really talk about what's going to take us from that 80 to 100%, and for that, I think we're all going to be better.
All right.
What? That was it. And please use Geico.
Save you 15% or less, right? I was waiting for that. Yeah, I would say, for us, we live in the world of reliability, sustainable power, and affordable power, right? And it kind of, again, it ties back to the same, the three C's: capacity, cost, and carbon. And we recognize that those don't come in the same order for every partner that we have. And so it's, for us, it's always an open conversation. We can't be everything to everyone in every geography, and we recognize that. But we do know where we have strengths, and we do know where we have expertise and where we don't. And certainly, I would say, being at the intersection of energy and technology, it's the best place to be. The two worlds have crashed into one another. And I could not be more excited and thrilled for the fact that I get to be in that nexus that Mario, you were talking about. And I'm happy. And I'm learning every day. And I'm grateful for opportunities like this.
Perfect. Thank you. Tony, please.
I think I'm going to round out where you started. It's all about partnerships. And I think that actually probably was a constant theme that you heard reverberate amongst all of us here. And I think that's going to kind of continue. And you can't go at it alone. And I think that's probably, I'll pass off to Mario on that.
Thanks, Tony. First of all, I would like to thank DCD for giving us the opportunity to sponsor this panel. Stephen, thank you, and thank you to you all three. It's been a great conversation. I guess I'd like to end on a little bit more of an optimistic note. We've talked a lot about problems and a little bit about opportunities, but personally, I think that there is a ton of opportunity in this sector, right? There is in this problem. We are all, even in just the last 12 months, we've made great strides in becoming more aligned. Decarbonization has never had more momentum. Private equity has never been in this sector like it has been before. We have the only really competing markets we have is defense at this point, right? There's nothing else that's getting this sort of attention, and the federal government is behind it with nuclear. All of these things are unprecedented in the last 12 months. And so with all of those incentives getting aligned, I think that we can all sit down at a table and say, all right, what are we going to do with this newfound alignment? From AECOM's perspective, like I said, we design, we build, we do natural gas pipelines, we build and design data centers all over the U.S. and all over the world, and we're really looking forward to seeing where the liquid cooling goes, where the decarbonization goes, where the renewable energy goes, because that nexus is incredibly powerful, and I'm excited for what happens next. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us, and to the panel, thank you much.